Hey everyone, Katie and Sergeant Steele here, and today I want to give you an updated unit review on the Basilisk. So the reason I'm doing an updated unit review, because this is June 2024, and we've just gotten the new Balance Dataslate, and they've changed the indirect fire rule. So the Basilisk works much different now. If you don't know about these rule changes, you can go see the video I've published already on my YouTube channel about the indirect fire rule changes and my thoughts on them or how to work around them. I'll be covering a little bit about that here, kind of updating you on the way I would recommend running this unit. So let's dive into it. Let's start with stats. Movement 10, toughness 9, 3-up save, 11 wounds, leadership 7, OC 3. It's a rather resilient unit. It's kind of got a carryover of the old open top rules from 7th edition. That's why it's only T9 rather than T10, unlike the Manticore or Death Strike. It's more akin to the Wyvern and the Hydra, which are open topped. And with that, it'll stick around and be able to put up with some punishing fire, but it's not obviously the most resilient vehicle ever. It's definitely not a Lehman Russ, not a Rogodorn, not a Macarius Vulcan, not a Baneblade, so on and so forth. Now let's go into its weapons and war gear. It has a heavy bolter or a heavy flamer. You can also add a hunter killer missile, but then its main weapon is the Earthshaker cannon. So this is blast, heavy, and indirect fire. So that's the rule that's changed. It is range 240 inches. It's got a 20-foot firing range. So if you go to an apocalypse game, you're probably going to hit everybody. That's one of the things I love about this unit. GW never changed that. Don't ever change that. It is D6 plus 3 attacks, ballistic skill 4, strength 8, minus 2 AP, flat 2 damage. So look at that profile. Remember, it's got blast and it's got heavy. So that means even with the indirect rule, which gives you -1 to hit, your opponent gets a cover save, and then you can never hit on a 1, 2, or 3 when firing out of line of sight. So when you have heavy, that's going to guarantee you always hit on a 4+. So if you stay still, even if you get the -1 to hit, well, the heavy gives you +1 to hit, so you're back to hitting on 4s. That's why this has heavy. So the heavy is still beneficial. It helps you get those hits in there. With its profile of strength 8, -2, flat 2, this is meant to kill elites and infantry. This is meant to kill Space Marines. It is very good at it, especially with blast. So you're hitting 5 and 10-man units. You're getting +1, +2 number of attacks. That means you could be getting up to 11 attacks on a 10-man unit. That's pretty spicy. That's pretty good, and that's without any of the buffs, because you could bring things that give you sustained hits 1 for your artillery, and then that could create even more hits. So keep that in mind. That would be like, your Master of Artillery that you get with your regimental attaches can give you that type of ability. So that's a great buff as well. So this is meant to do that. It is not meant to kill vehicles. It is not meant to take down a Land Raider, a Rhino even, your own artillery. It's just not meant to do that. It doesn't have the strength, doesn't have the AP. You could fire it at those things. You're wounding on 5s at best, usually most of the time. And you're going to get lethals with the new updated detachment rule against vehicles and monsters. But then it's only AP -2, flat 2. The flat 2 damage is really good, but you can do the same thing with heavy bolters. So why waste your Basilisk? This is meant to kill infantry and elites. Non-monsters, non-vehicles. That's what this thing is dedicated to do. So what is its special ability? What sets this thing apart? And that is the Earthshaker rounds. In your shooting phase, after this model has shot, if 1 or more of those attacks made with its Earthshaker cannon scored a hit against an enemy infantry unit, it's got to be infantry keyword, until the end of your opponent's next turn, that unit is shaken. While a unit is shaken, subtract 2 inches from its move characteristic and subtract 2 from the advance and charge rolls made for it. That is fantastic. So that means the Basilisk serves 2 roles: killing infantry and elites and controlling the movement of your opponent's infantry. -2 movements to move, advance, and charge is a big deal. That could help them fail a charge. It could keep them off an objective. It could prevent them from getting certain buffs, say if they get out of range of their characters that aren't leaders and are not attached, or certain other auras and benefits. Or maybe it prevents them from moving in such a way in which they would get those types of auras and ranges farther out across the table. Controlling your opponent's movement is one of the best things you can do in Warhammer 40,000. It is extremely powerful because movement is how you win games. So when you can control that, you can control who wins. I'm dead serious. So taking even 3 of these could be very beneficial to limit your opponent being able to get around the table, to be able to get on the objectives and to do the cool stuff that they want to do. Now that is the core function of this unit, the 2 core functions. So how would I actually run it? Well, I got a couple things I would recommend. 1, you could still do Daring Recon with the Scout Sentinel. The reason being, it gives you reroll 1s. You're still going to miss if you're firing indirect without line of sight on 1s, 2s, and 3s, but you get to reroll your 1s and a chance to get 4, 5s, and 6s. That's still a great benefit, so it's nice to have in your back pocket to be able to do that. The other reason why you may want a Scout Sentinel to pair with your artillery, like the Basilisk, is so that if your Basilisk does have line of sight, and you give it the order, take aim. So you have a tank commander or Lord Solar or Leontis, you give it take aim. You could hit on 2s and reroll 1s. The reason being, 4 up ballistic skill. Take aim makes it 3 up ballistic skill. Heavy gives you +1, then you're hitting on 2s. Daring Recon gives you reroll 1s. If you have direct line of sight. In my local club, we often play with the rules that windows and doors are what they are. So if you put this in a building, all the way in, remember, it's got to be all the way in, okay? It can't be hanging out like I'm showing you here. It's got to be all the way in. If it's all the way in, and you can see units through the windows and doors, you can shoot them. You have direct line of sight. I like to tuck this into buildings and not out on the open streets, because then my opponent often forgets about it when it's tucked inside these buildings. They move around the table, they get in my line of sight, they get in my firing lanes, and then I rain terror down upon them. Now, it's just one of 2 strategies you could use with this. You could also just keep it out of line of sight, hidden in your backfield. The reason it works for me to place them inside buildings, usually in my deployment zone, where I have line of sight, down the middle of the table and over on the left and right flanks, is because I'm usually a very aggressive guard player. I advance forward very quickly, I pressure my opponent, and I take the pressure off my artillery, off my backfield, and I force them to fight me hard in the middle of the table. I want to annihilate every unit that matters to them, and I want them to just drown in bodies as I flood the unit with 20-man infantry squads. That's what I'm about. So for that reason, my strategy with this works fairly well. Now, this doesn't work in all contexts. There are sometimes I go up in matchups, and I'm going to deploy back on purpose, right? Up against World Eaters and their charges, or other types of shenanigans like that. I may end up pushing way back to the edge of the table and waiting a turn before I pop out to start taking shots at my opponent, or pour a lot of stuff into reserves so I can try to pincer attack and come in turn 2 and hit my opponent from the sides, rather than letting them charge me turn 1 or turn 2 on their terms. I make it so I shoot them on my terms. But if you're not against one of those contexts, if you're not up against that type of list, and you have that type of opportunity to be able to use the strategy I'm telling you about with the buildings, I think it's well worth it. And you can do a lot of damage. But if you don't want to do that, and you want to play it safe and hide this in the backfield, that is also very effective. Because remember, the second part of its ability isn't just killing, it's controlling movement. And this does that very well. So that really is the summary of the Basilisk and what I would recommend doing with it and how I would play it. I think it's still a good unit. I think it's pretty effective. I think artillery still plays a key role in our army. Do I think you'll be running 3 or 4 of these? Well, obviously not 4, rule 3, but I play a lot of narrative play. Probably not. Probably not. Would you take maybe a Basilisk and a Manticore and a Wyvern? Sure, that begins to make more sense. Now, the other thing I'm going to be doing, though, is the videos on kind of the alternatives of these that still exist, such as the Earthshaker carriage. So I will be doing a report on that and the pros and cons of that unit compared to the Basilisk. Basilisk is just more resilient, and it's also more iconic, so I'm covering it first. But I will do a video on the Earthshaker carriage and share that with you all to give you my thoughts on it and what role I think it plays. I'm actually taking the Earthshaker carriage in my competitive July list in my competitive league, along with field ordnance batteries, just to surprise you a little bit. So I do not think artillery is dead. I just think it plays a different role other than killing. But it still can kill if we want it to as well. All right, that's it. That's all I have for you today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If I've missed anything, please put it down in the comments below. I love the dialogue that I have with you all and you have with each other. These types of conversations help us to learn and become better players. And when we are better players, we better enjoy the game. So, as always, have fun wargaming. And remember, Cadia stands.